So what scholars will call basic Gnosticism includes some basic themes that they hold in common. First, the world itself, which is material, is evil. Salvation, therefore, from the world must be escape from this physical world into something else. Gross materiality is not only temporary in some texts, but even bad. It's evil. And salvation, therefore, must be the knowledge of how you, that is the real you, your brain, not your brain, your mind or your soul or your spirit, not your body, that real you is existing in this material body, but salvation will be if it can learn how to escape the body and escape materiality. Salvation will become by knowledge, and that knowledge is a secret. Not everybody knows it. So only a few people know it. The content of this knowledge is related to human origins and destination. So sometimes you get these elaborate myths developed in some of these texts. Let's say that the supreme God is, in fact, has no name, is not a particular thing. It's this thought. It's just thinking. It's just abstract thinking. That thinking thinks. Well, what does the thinking thing think? The thinking thinks thoughts. Those thoughts start becoming emanations out of the thinking. And then those emanations think and emanate, and those become lesser beings still. And so the different divine beings, there are lots of divine beings that exist in the universe, and by thinking and being, they emanate inferior forms of being after themselves. And eventually, what happened is those inferior forms of being get less good and less like the most ultimate being. And one of them, according to one myth, Sophia, which means wisdom, it's a female name, but it also means wisdom. Sophia decides she wants to emanate, and she's supposed to do that with a male consort, because by this time these beings have male and female versions of themselves. She's supposed to only emanate or procreate by doing so with her male consort. She decides she wants to be like the supreme God and be able to emanate on her own. So she puts out a being on her own. In other words, she sort of gives birth without needing a man. Just the divine principle. Well, of course, when you do that, you end up with a monster. So the being that came out of Sophia ended up being a clumsy, maybe evil god. All of these are divine beings. That god decided at some point he wanted to create things, and so he didn't really do it very well. So he made our earth. He made the world as we know it. He made little human beings like you, just out of dirt and clay. And that's why, we were all creation, not of the supreme God who would do nothing imperfect, but of some stumbling or evil, at least clumsy God who made us. That explains why, things go wrong. Why is it that my arthritis acts up all the time? Couldn't God have made a human body that didn't have arthritis? Well, it's because the supreme God didn't make this body. The evil, clumsy God made the body. This happened, and so the world that we created, when you read in Genesis, it says God created the world. That's not the highest God. That's some clumsy God down further on the hierarchy of divine beings in the universe. That God created what we are. Now, what happened was at some point, either Sophia or some other beings, they got sorry for all of us clay-like mud people. And somehow a little spark of the divine itself either fell down or got cut up or put in our bodies, or God placed in our bodies or blew it into our bodies. But at least some human beings, not all human beings. In fact, human beings are in different categories. There's, the really low human beings like undergraduates. Then there are beings who are a little bit higher like graduate students. And then you have the supreme beings, Gnostics, like professors. So the true Gnostics, so it's not really like undergraduates and graduates, because some of you could be Gnostics. You would be the ones who really have a real spark in you, a spark of the divine. That spark of the divine wants to escape the mud body that it's trapped in. But you probably don't even know that you're really a spark trapped in a mud body until somebody comes along and tells you. And that's the job of the Redeemer. That's what Jesus did. Jesus was a Redeemer from the supreme God who comes in to find those people who have a spark of the divine in them, to blow on that spark, to get it going, and to get you to remember where you came from. You're not a mud body after all. The real you came from God himself, God's very self, the supreme God. So the true message of Christianity, according to these guys, is to learn who you are, where you came from, so you can escape the body and get back to your true origin. That is, you will become one with God again. And this was expressed in a poem by Theodotus. It went like this: who we were, what we have become, where we were, whither we were thrown, whither we are hastening, from what we are redeemed, what birth is, what rebirth is. Okay, now you answer the riddle. It's a poem riddle. Who we were. If you're a Gnostic, who were you? Answer. Divine being. Thank you. See, it's not hard. I'm not answering questions. I'm just trying. You'll remember this better if you answer. What have you become? Mud, entrapped in a dead body, entrapped in materiality. Where were you? Heaven, with the Divine Father, with God. Whither we were thrown. Where have you been thrown? Into the earth, into the world, into materiality. Where are you hastening? Where are you going in such a hurry? Back to the divine God. What are you redeemed from? You're redeemed from Jesus? The material world. You're redeemed from being embodied. What is birth? In this system, what is birth? Damnation, death. When you're born, your spark is entrapped in your body. That's not a good thing. You shouldn't be celebrating your birthday, for crying out loud. That's like celebrating when you were thrown in prison. And what is rebirth? Death, or learning your true self. Learning that the true self won't die at all. So this learning is your rebirth. So the little poem is a riddle that contains these doctrines within itself. So here's the true self. The spark of light is trapped in an alien body with all its sensual passions. Evil powers exist, all the different gods that were emanated, a bunch of those are evil, and they fly around the sky and the heavens, and they try to keep the true self asleep or drunk in order to keep the evil world together. In other words, they don't want you to learn, and they don't want your spark to be able to fly through. But really wise guys like me, we have the secrets. And I can give you words, clues, secrets, that if you know those things, you can use these secrets to unlock the gates that lead back to God. So this is kind of a common storyline or myth. There's a hymn of the pearl that I mentioned before, which basically tells this, that a king of the east sends a royal prince by way of the region of Messene to Egypt in order to get a precious pearl, which is being guarded by a fierce dragon. Yeah. It's like a video game, right? The prince is poisoned, or actually drugged would be a better accurate translation, and made intoxicated by the Egyptians. But he, the prince, is awakened by a message from the king. He, the prince, takes the pearl by defeating the dragon with the name of his father and returns to the east, where he puts on a robe of knowledge, gnosis, and ascends to the king's palace, entering the realm of peace and living happily forever after.